Okay, young friends, we are going to finish up chapter 9 today, hopefully, if I don't stop and talk very much. So when we left off, Harry is following Professor McGonagall because she just busted him flying around. And he's worried he's going to get kicked out of school. Now, Connor's in my lap. He doesn't want to get out of my lap today. Okay. He's following behind her. Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as she strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled. He just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking at him. He had to jog to keep up. Now he'd done it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. He'd be packing up his bags in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on their doorstep? Up the front steps, up the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. She wrenched open the doors and marched along corridors with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she was taking him to Dumbledore. He thought of Hagrid, expelled, but allowed to stay on as gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the others becoming wizards while he stomped around the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. My phone's buzzing. Professor McGonagall stopped outside a classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick. Could I borrow Wood for a moment?" Wood? Thought Harry, bewildered. Was Wood a cane she was going to use on him? But Wood turned out to be a person. A burly fifth-year boy came out of Flitwick's class looking very confused. "Follow me, you two," said Professor McGonagall, and they marched up the corridor, Wood looking curiously at Harry. In here, Professor McGonagall pointed them into a classroom that was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing very rude words on the blackboard. "Out, Peeves," she barked. Peeves threw the chalk in a bin, which clanged loudly, and he swooped out, cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him and turned to face the boys. "Potter, this is Oliver Wood. Wood, I've found you a seeker." Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delight. "Are you serious, Professor?" "Absolutely," said Professor McGonagall crisply. "The boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter?" Potter nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be being expelled, and some of the feelings started coming back in his legs. "He caught that thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive," Professor McGonagall told Wood. "He didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it." Wood was now looking as though all of his dreams had come true. "I bet he is." "Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter?" he asked excitedly. "Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team," Professor McGonagall explained. "He's just the build for a seeker, too," said Wood, now walking around Harry and staring at him. "Light, speedy. We'll have to get him a decent broom, though, Professor. A Nimbus 2000 or a Clean Sweep 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore and see if we cannot break the first-year rule. Bend it. Heaven knows, we need a better team than last year. Flattened in the last match by Slytherin. I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks." Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glasses at Harry. "I want to hear you're training hard, Potter, or I may change my mind about punishing you." Then she suddenly smiled. "Your father would have been proud," she said. "He was an excellent Quidditch player himself." Whew. He didn't get kicked out. He gets to play Quidditch. "You're joking." "You're joking." It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened when he left the grounds with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway to his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. "Seeker," he said. "But first years never. You must be the youngest player in about a century," said Harry, shoveling pie into his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of the afternoon, Wood told me. Ron was so amazed, so impressed. He just sat there and gaped at Harry. "I start training next week," said Harry, "only don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret." Fred and George Weasley now came into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. "Well done," said George in a low voice. "Wood told us. We're on the team too, beaters." I tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year, said Fred. We haven't won since Charlie left, but this year's team's going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we've got to go. Lee Jordan reckons he's found a new secret passageway out of the school. Bet it's that one behind the statue of Gregory the Swarmy that we found our first week. Let's go. Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Having a last meal, Potter? When are you getting that train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground and have your little friends with you, Harry said coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the high table was full of teachers, neither of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. I'd take you on any time on my own, said Malfoy. Tonight, if you want. Wizard's duel. Wands only, no contact. What's the matter? Never heard of a wizard's duel, I suppose. Of course he had, said Ron, wheeling around. I'm his second. Who's yours? Malfoy looked at Crabbe, looked at Goyle, sizing them up. Crabbe. Midnight, all right. We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. What is a wizard's duel? Said Harry. And what do you mean you're my second? Well, a second's there to take over if you die, said Ron casually. Getting started on that, the last bit of his cold pie. Catching the look in Harry's face, he quickly added, but people only die in proper duels. With real wizards, mostly you and Malfoy will just be able to do is like send sparks at each other. I bet he expected to... Oh, skipped a sentence. Neither of you knows enough magic to do any real damage. I expected he thought you would refuse anyway. What if I wave my wand and nothing happens? Throw it away and punch him in the nose, Ron suggested. Excuse me. They both looked up, and it was Hermione Granger. Can't a person eat into this place in peace? Said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help but overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. Bet you could, Ron muttered. And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of all the points you will lose for Gryffindor if you're caught, and you're bound to be. It's very selfish of you. And it's really none of your business, said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. All the same, it wasn't what you'd expect, what you'd call the perfect end to a day, Harry thought as he lay awake much later listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville still wasn't back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice such as, if he tries to curse you, you better dodge it, because I can't remember how to block them. There was a very good chance that they were going to get caught by Filch or Mrs. Norris, and Harry felt he was pushing his luck, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming up out of the darkness, and this was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron muttered at last. We better go. They pulled on their bathrobes, picked up their wands, and crept across the tower room, down the spiral staircase, and into the Gryffindor common room. A few embers were still glowing in the fireplace, turning all the armchairs into hunched black shadows. They had almost reached the portrait hole when a voice spoke from the chair nearest to them. I can't believe you are going to do this, Harry. A lamp flicked on. It was Hermione Granger, wearing a pink bathrobe and a frown. You, said Ron furiously, go back to bed. I almost told your brother, Hermione snapped. Percy, he's a prefect. He'd put a stop to this. Harry couldn't believe anyone could be quite so interfering. Come on, he said to Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the fat lady and climbed through the hole. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at them like an angry goose. You don't care about Gryffindor. You only care about yourselves. I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup, and you'll lose all the points I got from Professor McGonagall for knowing the switching spells. Go away. All right, but I warned you. You must remember what I said when you're on the train home tomorrow. You're so... But what they were, they didn't find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on a nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of Gryffindor Tower. Now what am I going to do? She said shrilly. That's your problem, said Ron. We've got to go. We're going to be late. They hadn't even reached the end of the corridor when Hermione caught up with them. I'm coming with you, she said. You are not. You think I'm going to stand out here and wait for Filch to catch me? If he finds all three of us, I'll tell him the truth, that I was trying to stop me and you can back me up. You've got some nerve, said Ron loudly. Shut up, both of you, said Harry sharply. I heard something. It was sort of a snuffling. Mrs. Norris, breathed Ron, squinting in the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris. It was Neville. He was curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but jerked suddenly awake as they crept nearer. Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get in. Keep your voice down, Neville. The password's pig snout, but it won't help you now because the fat lady's gone off somewhere. How's your arm? Said Harry. Fine, said Neville, showing them. Madame Pomfrey mended it in about a minute. Good. Well, look, Neville, we've got somewhere to be. We'll see you later. Don't leave me, said Neville, scrambling to his feet. I don't want to stay here alone. The Bloody Baron's been passed twice already. Ron looked at his watch and then gazed furiously at Hermione and Neville. If either of you get us caught, I will never rest until I've learned the curse of the bogies Quirrell told us about and used it on you. Hermione opened her mouth, perhaps to tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of the bogies, but Harry hissed at her to be quiet and motioned everyone forward. They flitted along corridors striped with bars of moonlight from the high windows. At every turn, Harry expected to run into Filch or Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up a staircase to the third floor and tiptoed toward the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there yet. The crystal trophy cases glimmered when the moonlight caught them. Cups, shields, plates, and statues winked gold and silver in the darkness. They edged along the walls, keeping their eyes on the doors on either end of the room. Harry took out his wine in case Malfoy leapt in and started at once, and the minutes crept by. He's late. Maybe he's chickened out, said Ron. Then a noise in the next room made them jump. Harry had only just raised his wand when he heard someone speak, and it wasn't Malfoy. Sniff around, my sweet. They might be lurking in a corner. It was Filch speaking to Mrs. Norris. Horror-struck, Harry waved madly at the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. They scurried silently toward the door, away from Filch's voice. Neville's robes had barely whipped around the corner when they heard Filch enter the trophy room. They're in here somewhere, he heard them mutter, probably hiding this way. Harry mouthed to the others, and petrified they began to creep down a long gallery full of suits of armor. They could hear Filch getting near. Neville suddenly let out a frightened squeak and broke into a run. He tripped, grabbed Ron around the waist, and the pair of them toppled right into a suit of armor. The clanging and crashing were enough to wake the whole castle. Run! Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was following. They swung around the doorpost and galloped down one corridor, then in the other. Harry in the lead, without any idea where they were going or what they were doing. They ripped through a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway, hurtled along it, and came out near their charms classroom, which they knew was miles away from the trophy room. I think we've lost him, Harry panted, leaning against the cold wall and wiping his forehead. Neville was bent double, wheezing and sputtering. I told you, Hermione gasped, clutching at the stitch in her chest. I told you. We've got to get back to the Gryffindor Tower, said Ron, quickly as possible. Malfoy tricked you, said Hermione to Harry. You realize that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew someone would be there in the trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off. Harry thought she was probably right, but he wasn't going to tell her that. Let's go. It wasn't going to be that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when the doorknob rattled and something came shooting out of a classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught sight of them and gave a squeal of delight. Shut up, Peeves. Please, you'll get us thrown out, Peeves cackled. Like that, yeah. Wandering around at midnight, it go firsties. Tut, tut, tut. Naughty, naughty, you'll get caughty. Not if you don't give us away, please, Peeves. I should tell Filch I should, he said in a saintly voice, but then his eyes glittered wickedly. It's for your own good, you know. Get out of the way, snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeves. That was a big mistake. Students out of bed! Peeves bellowed. Students out of bed down the charms corridor! Ducking under Peeves, they ran for their lives, right to the end of the corridor where they slammed into a door and it was locked. This is it, Ron moaned as they pushed helplessly against the door. We're done for. This is the end. They could hear footsteps. Filch was running as fast as he could toward Peeves' shouts. Oh, move over, Hermione snarled, and she grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, and whispered, Alohomora. The lock clicked and the door swung open. They piled through it, shut it quickly, and pushed their ears against it, listening. Which way did they go, Peeves? Filch was saying. Quick, tell me. Say please. Don't mess with me, Peeves. Where did they go? Shan't say nothing. If you can't say please, said Peeves in his annoying sing-songy voice. All right, please. Nothing. I told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please. All they heard was the sound of Peeves whooshing away and Filch cursing in rage. He thinks this door is locked, said Harry, whispering. I think we'll be okay. Get off, Neville. For Neville had been tugging on the sleeve of Harry's bathrobe for the last minute. What? Harry turned around and saw quite clearly what. For a moment, he was sure he had walked into a nightmare. This was too much on top of everything that had happened so far. They weren't in a room as he had supposed. They were in a corridor, the forbidden corridor on the 3rd floor, and now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of a monstrous dog, a dog that had filled the whole space between the ceiling and the floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling eyes, 3 noses twitching and quivering in their direction, 3 drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes and yellow fangs. It was standing quite still, all 6 eyes on them, and Harry knew that the only reason they weren't dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise, but it was quickly getting over that. Harry groped for the doorknob. Between Filch and death, he'd take Filch. They fell backwards. Harry slammed the door shut and they ran, almost flew back down the corridor. Filch must have hurried off to look for them somewhere else because he didn't see him anywhere. But they hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the 7th floor. Where on earth have you all been? She asked, looking at their bathrobes hanging off their shoulders and their flushed, sweaty faces. Never mind that. Pick snout, panted Harry, and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling into armchairs. It was a while before any of them said anything. Neville, indeed, looked as though he might never speak again. What do they think they're doing, keeping a thing like that locked up in the school? Said Ron finally. If any dog needs exercise, that one does. Hermione got both her breath and bad temper back again. You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you? She snapped. Didn't you see what he was standing on? The floor, Harry suggested. I wasn't looking at his feet. I was too busy looking at his heads. No, not the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something. She stood up, glaring at them. I hope you're pleased with yourselves. We all could have been killed, or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed. No, we don't mind. Ron stared after her, his mouth open. You'd think we dragged her along, wouldn't you? But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about as he climbed into bed. The dog was guarding something. What had Hagrid said? Gringotts was the safest place in the world for something you wanted to hide, except perhaps Hogwarts. It looked as though Harry had found out where the grubby little package from Vault 713 was. Oh! And that is the end of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 on Monday. Interesting enough. Have a good weekend.